Hey guys, welcome to your second lesson. This is week 2 of our lockdown English classes. I hope you guys have had a good week. It's been so good for me to read through your homework and classwork and to engage with you guys a little bit like that. Again, some of you have reached out to message me on Schoology, and thank you for that. That's been great to kind of hear what you have questions about, what you've been thinking about. Feel free to reach out at any time. It actually really helps me both to come up with homework for you and just to also, hear from you and see how you're doing. So don't hesitate to reach out. We're going to get started today. First, before we go into full screen here, if I could have you guys collect your English materials. So you guys saw this slide last time. Do a quick materials check for yourself. Pause this if you need to and go and collect your materials. Okay, now that you've done that, just a quick announcement. I've updated the Just for Fun folder. So if you guys go on to our page on Schoology, obviously there's all this stuff, right? But in the Just for Fun folder, there are some fun articles to read if you have extra time. Some of you may have already been reading through them. But there are 3 things at the bottom that are new. One of them, for those of you who are creative writers and you want to try, maybe you have a little bit of extra time now that you're not commuting to and from school to take on a project. There's this great guide called the New Pages Guide for Young Authors that I've linked there. And there are all kinds of different magazines that publish student writing. You guys have done a lot of creative writing this year. So you might want to try and get some of your work out there. That always looks impressive when somebody your age has published a poem or a short story in a magazine. So if you've got some extra time, you might want to check that out. Also, if you're sick of reading or, be honest, watching or playing video games or watching Netflix, and you want to listen to something, maybe go on a walk around your neighborhood, there's this great literature radio station or this set of different it's called the Museum of Literature Ireland. They've just started a digital radio station, so it's kind of like a podcast about all things literature related. So if you're looking for something a little bit different to listen to, I highly recommend the Stinging Fly podcast if you like poetry and short stories. They're a magazine in Dublin that publishes poetry and short stories. Not usually for people your age, but it's really good. So anyway, also too, the third thing that I have up there, you guys may have heard that it's been pretty historic few weeks for my country of origin. We had a little bit of trouble there in Washington, D.C., and then we've had the inauguration finally, thankfully. And there was a great young poet. She's only 23 years old, and she was reading some of her poetry at the inauguration. It's pretty inspiring, 5 minutes long if you want to check that out. So that just a few things for fun if you're bored or if you're looking for something a little bit different to do. I know it's been pretty rainy, so it's been hard to get out and about. So let's go ahead and get started with the lesson. Okay, let's load this up here. Okay, so for our warm-up, go ahead and open your copybooks. And you should already have all of these words written down someplace, right? You used at least 3 of them to do your classwork last time of labeling a newspaper with a headline, a subheading, a dateline, an article, a picture, placeline, caption, advertisement, or byline. So you hopefully have done that. If you haven't, make sure you turn it in. I don't mind if you get it in late, just make sure it's done. Now I want you to write the definition of 3 of these words in your own words. So don't look up the definition. You can look it up as a reference if you want, but don't use anybody else's words but your own. And try and just explain what a headline is or what a subheading is or what an article is. Actually, maybe don't do headline because I've given you guys an example that uses headline. So I said a headline is the title of a newspaper article, whether it's print or online. And it concisely or shortly summarizes the main points of the article and presents an angle or perspective on the story. So that's kind of where a writer has made a choice, all right? So just based off of your reading and based off of your knowledge, I just want to see how you would define one of these, right? So my I want you to get as close to the right answer as possible, but the really important thing is that you tell me in your words how you're thinking about these terms, right? So again, don't use anyone else's words, just explain to me what a caption is, or what a picture is, or what a byline is. All right, and yours doesn't have to be as long as mine. If it's a short kind of definition, that's fine. All right, so stop the video and do that, and then come back. Okay, so since you've stopped the video and you've done the warm-up, now it's time for us to take out our homework journals and to write down what we have. First of all, we're going to try and have a live class next week. So I've scheduled it all. We're going to have it on Microsoft Teams. I'll set that up for you, and I'm going to put a link on Schoology, so I'll communicate with you more on Schoology through updates and on our homepage for that. Try to make that. For the classwork, you have classwork on Schoology. On our main page, you're going to need to turn in that definitions warm-up that you just did. So take a picture of your copybook, submit that so I can see those 3 definitions in your own words. Feel free to include more definitions if you want. You can always go above and beyond and get higher points for that. And then your second homework assignment, this is a little bit longer than last week. You have at least 3 paragraphs to write of an article. All right, so we're going to talk about how articles in journalism are a little bit shorter than, we're going to talk about how paragraphs in journalism are a little bit shorter than paragraphs in other types of writing. But so that might sound really long, but it's not going to be super, super long. Let's just look at that. All right, so now that you've written down your homework and classwork, and you can just double check the due dates on Schoology, make sure that you write down your heading for today, right? So another thing that we'll have are more copybook checks, right? That's going to be part of your participation while we're working remotely. So write down the date. Today's Thursday, the 12th of January. Write down the learning intention. Can I recognize and recreate an inverted pyramid structure? All right. And success for this is going to look like 3 paragraphs about a headline that follows the structure. I'm also just realizing, sorry, that my video is kind of cutting off some of the slides, but remember there's a link to the slides too on Schoology, and I'll try next week to make sure that my little video doesn't interfere with what you guys are seeing. Okay, you've written that down, and remember, pause anytime you think that this is going too fast. The next thing I'd like you guys to do is to read an article. So there are a few different possible articles. This is one of them. So go to the sample articles folder on Schoology and read any one of those articles. And as you're reading, I want you to write down in your copybooks your answers to these 3 questions. So which paragraph or paragraphs give the most important facts? Where do quotes appear? And how important is the information at the end of the article? And also, how do you know? So go ahead and do that. Okay, so now that you've read the article, you might notice that the way that something is set up in journalism is a little bit different than like a short story, right? Remember we talked about rising action and falling action for a short story, or a poem, right? This looks much different from a poem. So what's the form that it's taking? It's usually what we refer to for journalism, the structure of an article is called the inverted pyramid. So this is just a picture. You don't have to put this in your copies or anything. This is a little bit more complicated than what we'll get into today. But this is something I share with my second years when we're talking about media studies. And it just is meant to show that like most of the information in a written article is going to come at the beginning, right? That's what we call the lead, right? So the lead is going to tell us who, what, when, where, and why. Or as much of that as possible. The lead starts out the article, and we want most of the important information closest to the front of the article. That goes all the way down to the end of the article. The end of the article is usually extra information or the least important information, or just sometimes additional information. Like if you guys read this one on Marcus Rashford, the end was giving more details about what his organization wants to do to end child hunger and poverty, like some more specifics, right? But it wasn't the most newsworthy part of his information. that was really in the lead, right? That was when he was saying, hey, in this article in particular, he was saying, like, look, we need to change the way that free meals for poor families are working in the UK, right? And why, right? Because people were sharing on social media that that a lot of the food that they were getting wasn't enough or wasn't like very good quality. Okay. Um, so our structure that we're going to use when we're writing is as follows, right? Our first paragraph is going to be the lead, right? The most important information, those 5 W's: who, what, when, where, why, and how, right? We're answering those questions with as much specificity as possible, as many details as possible. The second paragraph is going to be like more description and detail, right? A little bit of like helpful background. And the third paragraph is going to be a quote by someone. It's got to be some important information, right? So paragraphs in journalism can be short, right? You could have a 1-sentence paragraph. Short is fine. The most important thing in journalism is that you pack as much information into as few words as possible, right? So make sure you write this down. This should also be in your copies. Okay, so what does this look like? And again, I'm wondering if I can move my little... I'm gonna shut off my video. Sorry, guys, just so that you guys can see this whole thing. So this is a sample article that I wrote for my homework, and this is just another example of like, you know, it doesn't have to be what you're writing about. Just has to be something you've witnessed. It doesn't have to be super newsworthy, right? Like some of you, when you're writing your headlines, you were writing about like, you know, Donald Trump or like a snowstorm in a different country. But this is just going to be something that we've witnessed, right? This is not something that's in the news. It's something that you are witnessing as the news, right? So within my 5 kilometers, there wasn't a lot I could write about. So I wrote, rains keep Ballincollig residents from Riverside Park. So this is after a conversation with my neighbor. So that's my headline. Here are my 3 paragraphs, and you guys can see how it follows that structure that we were just talking about on the previous page, right, that you have in your copies. So at least 2 local families were kept away from the Ballincollig Regional Park this morning due to excessive winter rains. Both the McLaughlins and the Novaks from the western part of town chose to avoid the weather by staying inside with their small children. So notice that's only 2 sentences, right? But it's got a lot of specific information. Ballincollig Regional Park is mentioned, the time of day, what's going on, all of the who, what, when, where, and why, the McLaughlin family and the Novak family. While the rain stopped in late afternoon, by that time the youngest members of the family had already started their naps, and taking advantage of the weather was impossible for both families, right? So some extra information, a little bit of background. Finally, we get to a quote, right? So somebody who was there, who saw something, what was the most important thing that they said? Last time I went down the path, it was flooded, said Anna Novak. The wheels of the stroller became stuck and I almost left it there. So I picked that because that was kind of an interesting quote, and it gave an illustration of, you know, why this news story was happening. Why didn't people want to go to the park? All right. So there are my 3 paragraphs. That is a true story that is based off of something that's actually happening that I witnessed, and it's following that structure, right? Here's what I'd like you guys to do. So you're going to take your headline from last week, or you can create a new headline for something that you've witnessed, right? Anytime recently, like in the past 2 weeks, and draft a 3-paragraph article following the structure that we just went over, right? So this structure, that's what you're going to use, right? And this is my example of how to do that. So that's what your homework should look like. Remember, make sure that you start with the most important information, right? And if you haven't defined the word lead in your copybooks yet, make sure you write down what the lead is. That's going to be an important word to know. Make sure you include a quote. Make sure you use short sentences or short paragraphs at least. And remember, you have to have been there in order to write about it. Okay, so make sure you're writing about something that you've been there. Maybe some of you are like, I don't know what to write about. I don't like, you know, whatever. I don't talk to my neighbors about their small children. These are a few examples from your homework last week that I thought were really great. So a couple people wrote about getting new dogs, right? Somebody wrote about being unimpressed by New Year's Eve. Local girl furious over sold out PS5s. That was another true headline that somebody wrote about. And then local teens devastated after learning school closure extended to February. So those are 5 examples from your classmates that were just like really impressive to me when I read these. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, this is exactly what a headline needs to be. So if you're struggling, look at these as examples and just think, whatever is happening in your life, whatever you're witnessing, can be something that you write a news story about for our unit on media studies. All right, guys, that went a little bit longer than I planned. Sorry about that, but reach out if you have any questions. Do try to fill out the ed puzzle this time. I'm going to try and make it required for future lessons where I'm still working out a couple of the kinks because I think it's really, really good way for me to see what you're getting out of our lessons. And also, too, I'm hoping next week we will be able to see each other in person and go over what's been happening for you and any questions that you might have about our unit. All right. Until then, talk to you soon.